Good evening and welcome to my very exciting live bibliotherapy session tonight when I'm going to be interviewing Claire Fuller about her new novel, Unsettled Ground, which is up for the Women's Prize for Fiction. It's been shortlisted. So it's one of 6 books shortlisted for this year's Women's Prize. Claire Fuller is a fabulous novelist and also an artist, which makes her very close to my heart. And she has written 3 other novels: Our Endless Numbered Days, which won the Desmond Elliott Prize, Swimming Lessons, which I don't have as a physical copy because I listened to it as an audiobook, and Bitter Orange, all of which I deeply love. And now we have her new book, Unsettled Ground, which we're going to be talking about this evening. So I'm just going to bring Claire into the session and then we can start asking her questions. Let's hope that it's the first time that I've done a live session with another person, and we have been practicing. Yay! Here you are.
Yeah.
Welcome, Claire.
Oh,
It's lovely to have you with me here this evening.
lovely to be here. I'm just trying to adjust so that you can actually see me.
Yes, I actually do really feel like you're here in the same room as me. That's the magic of technology. So even though we couldn't make it work to be on Facebook Live simultaneously, it's great that here we are on Instagram and I can see that lots of lovely people are joining, and we will also be saving it to IGTV so that people can watch later. And also my clever husband is hopefully going to save it to YouTube as well, so people can catch up there. So Claire, I'm really thrilled and excited about your new novel being on the Women's Prize shortlist, which is fantastic. And even before it was shortlisted, I absolutely was loving it and had read it and listened to it on audio as well. It's great on audio, by the way. Do you listen to your audiobooks?
No, I don't don't reread. I don't listen to them again. So anyone who's read this more recent, read it since it's come out, has read it more recently than me, because I probably haven't read it for about a year now.
Wow. So
And
does
I
it feel slightly like old history to you?
Well, I have, I'm writing the next book. So yeah, it's before, just before it came out, I kind of had to remind myself, but sometimes it does feel like, who are these characters? I have to, I can't remember. Yeah, but I think I've kind of caught up with them. But I don't want to reread or listen, because I just know that I would want to make some changes. There are things that I would find that I would think I could do better, and obviously it's far too late. Can't change.
Yes, and you don't need to, so leave it. But so we'd love to hear your thoughts on the novel. Maybe you could give a very brief description of what it's about for anyone that's joined us tonight who hasn't actually read it yet.
Yeah. So it's about twins, Jeannie and Julius, who are 51, and they still live with their mother. And the novel opens with their mother dying of a stroke, and they find her on the kitchen floor. It's not a spoiler because it does happen right at the beginning. And they have lived a very insular, isolated life. Jeannie has been diagnosed with a heart condition, so she's stayed at home gardening. Julius has done odd jobs for people, but they've really survived on a hand-to-mouth basis. They don't have any, very little technology, they don't have transport, very little education, no qualifications. So when their mother dies, they are suddenly kind of thrust out in the world and have to cope with everything. Not only her funeral and how to afford to bury her, but they realise that their mother has left them with a lot of debt, and they can't carry on living in the cottage that they're in. So they have to, it's almost like they're coming of age 51, and they don't cope very well.
Yes, and one of the major themes in the book is their poverty and the way that when their mother dies, they're slightly scrabbling around, desperately thinking maybe there's a stash of money somewhere. There's a biscuit tin, and all it has in it is £3.28 or something utterly tragic. And they're literally thinking, how are we going to pay for the coffin? How are we going to pay for a wake? Do we want to have a wake anyway? And it's really very moving and sad to see them going through this. And then they also have to cope with what to eat, how to live in the real world, because it seems that their mother's done everything for them in a way up till this moment. And she's kept them in the dark, as it turns out, about a lot of their what they thought was true. But we're not going to give spoilers. But one does realize while reading the book that there's a lot of things that Jeannie and Julius imagined was true about their lives, but they they discover slowly that they're completely wrong. I've just seen Nora saying that she truly felt their terror. It was incredible how this was written with such a softness. Thank you, Nora, for that comment. I agree. It was a book that really did keep me on the edge of my seat as I was wondering what was going to happen to them. And it's difficult to know how much to reveal, but there is a moment when they have to look for another place to live. And I found that really unbearable, and just awful, because Julius, the brother, there's Julius and Jeannie, twins, he's quite a person who doesn't give the game away. He doesn't give the game away even to his sister. He keeps her in the dark, and he's saying, oh, I found us a lovely place to live, and it's not a lovely place to live. It's really...
Sorry for Julius, though. You know, he does things with the best intentions, but he just always gets it wrong. You know.
Yes. I really loved both Julius and Jeannie as characters. They're both incredibly real to me, and I feel like I would know them if I saw them walking down the street. But Claire, tell me, what was it that gave you the idea for writing the novel? What was the first catalyst for this story?
Well, this will, it doesn't, it's not, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler, but it will, the thing you were trying to avoid about where they end up living was the catalyst. So I do, you know, if I'm going to talk about the inspiration for this book, I have to talk about that. So at some point in the novel, Jeannie and Julius have to go and live in a caravan that they find in the woods, a very dilapidated, horrible caravan that has mice in it and is very smelly and horrible. And really, it's my son, who's 25, nearly 26, found a caravan like this, came across a caravan like this in the woods fairly near where I live. And he knows that I like weird places, atmospheric places, even if they're not very nice places. So I went out there with him, and it had once been white, but was now green from being under the trees. The windows were smashed, the door was hanging off, but someone had clearly been living there at some point, because there was old bedding left there and, you know, just things left behind. It was quite a very kind of sad feeling. It had a lot of atmosphere, and it just made me think, who had been living in this place? How had they managed there? Because there was no electricity, there was no sanitation. And what in their life had taken them to that place, and after they left, what happened? You know, did their life kind of carry on going downhill, or did they raise themselves up out of this place? And really, from that, Jeannie was just kind of born in my head rather than on paper to begin with, and rather than start at that point, I went back in time to understand what in her life had taken her to that point where she had to live in a caravan in the woods.
So was Julius not born in your head at the same time? Did he come along later?
He came along, I think, as soon as I started writing, but
Mm.
but while I was just perhaps doing some thinking, because this would have all been happening as I was finishing Bitter Orange, because the next book kind of starts coming in my head, and it's only when I've absolutely finished Bitter Orange do I start the next one. So I might have been thinking about Jeannie in a very, very vague way. No plan, no plot, no real idea who she was till I started actually writing on the page. And I think Dot, her mother, and Julius came along at the same time. So
Mm.
they were all born at the same time.
Simultaneously, almost. Well, Dot is a really fantastic character who, as you say at the beginning of the book, dies. It's within the first 3 pages. And I found the description of her death incredibly moving because it was really vivid and believable. She just feels a pain behind her eye. And I really loved the description of her not knowing what on earth was going on.
And
And
that nobody has asked me about that yet in all the interviews I've done, and I did find that really interesting to research, because when I had decided what she was going to die of, and she dies of a stroke, I kind of I searched online for what that might feel like. Obviously, not that you're going to die of it; you have to survive it. But what does it feel like to actually have a stroke? And I came across a TED talk by I think she's a neuroscientist called Jill Bolt Taylor, and yeah, she was looking into the brain. I can't remember what research she was doing, and at the time that she was doing this, she had a stroke. So she was almost observing herself while she had this stroke, because that was kind of part of her studies. And so in this TED talk, she really describes what it was like moment by moment. And it is a brilliant, brilliant TED talk. I really recommend it. So the whole description of what Dot goes through is kind of taken from her talk.
that's really fascinating because it did feel absolutely real. And I did wonder if you had had any experience of what you went through, obviously hoping you never had a stroke. But I think it was also, there's a description of her feeling like she's completely in love with the world
Yeah.
just before she dies, which is incredibly sad, but it's also actually quite a lovely thought that she did die while feeling almost a sort of sense of transcendent
Yeah.
happiness. So it is a very sad beginning of the book, but it's also not a completely tragic description of death. And did you get that from this TED talk as well? Was
Yeah.
that mentioned?
Yeah. That she kind of feels at one with the world and part of everything that's around her. I Yeah, I think there's no dog. I'm pretty sure there's no dog in that Jill Bolt Taylor actually was with. I can't remember now, but I think just the kind of things she's doing, I think she still carries on almost getting up and brushing her teeth or doing something in the mirror, and she kind of feels very connected. It is quite surprising. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's very
this
interesting.
came into the description.
So, and so she dies at the very beginning, but then she's very present throughout the book because Jeannie and Julius are thinking about her, talking about her, and discovering things about her. And also, one of the things that you do very subtly is show how they were all perceived by the rest of the village, and how that obviously gives us a different image of them when we see them through the eyes of the other people, because they live in this very rural community, kind of in the middle of nowhere to some degree, though they're right on the edge of society. It's a village with a delicatessen, and they sell their vegetables to the deli and try and scratch a bit of a living from that. And then there's this wonderful character who Jeannie goes to work for, who has inherited the house, I think.
Yeah.
And she has her daughter Angel, and there's sort of the newcomers into the village, which is a really typical English countryside idea as well. And she gives employment to Jeannie, and Jeannie's never even thought of getting a job before, and that's another of the great weird things about her eccentricity, because her mother told her that she had, because she has this heart condition, she's never looked outside thinking that she can go and make a living for herself. So it's really interesting to see the choices that were made for Jeannie and Julius by their mother. And it's only when she dies, when they're 51 years old, that they begin to live. And as you say, they have their kind of coming of age then. So one of the other things that I really love about the book is the piano, thinking of the caravan and the terrible poverty of how they live in that caravan, and how it's all green and moldy and full of mice and generally decaying. They, through a series of bizarre events, end up bringing their piano to the clearing near the caravan. And I really love that image. And we have Julius at one point playing the piano kind of in the gloaming. And that's also an image which is in your first book,
Yeah.
in a not exactly the same way, but in Our Endless Numbered Days, there's a very important piano, which is made of just a piece of wood that's been whittled, as I remember, by the father in that book. And he's created a piano keyboard, which the daughter plays and learns amazingly and miraculously to play the piano, hearing the notes in her head. And that is a really wonderful image from that book. But you clearly have a deep relationship with pianos.
I do, but not. I don't know where the idea of a piano in the woods comes from, because there's nothing, nothing in my memory for that really. And I'm not musical at all. I can't play the piano. I can just about read music because I learnt for about 2 years the oboe at school, but I was very, very bad. But my father played the piano, and he was self-taught, but he would play certain pieces of Bach, and we had a baby grand piano, and it was in the sitting room underneath where my bedroom was. And my father would play after I had gone to bed, and the sound would just, I would just lie in bed and hear this Bach being played, probably really quite badly because he was self-taught, and he would just, self-taught as in he would listen to the music and learn. So he couldn't read music either. So it was just done through ear. And he would repeat phrases over and over and over in order to kind of learn them. And that is such a vivid memory of mine as a child, just hearing this music waft up through the house as I lay in bed. And it's a beautiful memory.
Oh, that's really interesting, because I'd always assumed that you actually must live in a highly musical household and that everyone's bursting into song and playing instruments all around you, because music is such a big theme in, well, at least in these two novels. And also, Jeannie and Julius are incredibly musical. And we gather as the book goes on that they spend a lot of their evenings playing music to each other and with their mother Dot. And when their father was alive, he was also involved. So instead of watching telly or doing the things that most 21st century people do, they were singing songs and playing music to each other. And so do you think that image came to you because of your father's playing to you in the night?
Well, although, you know, I say I'm not musical at all, my son is very musical, and he is an acoustic guitarist, and one of his songs is in the novel. So We Roam Through the Garden, the lyrics from that, he wrote it. So if anybody wants to go and look him up, he's henryailing.com. You can go and see his website and hear that piece of music.
Fantastic.
And I listened to that as I was writing, and also another piece of music called Polly Vaughan. It's an old English folk song, so there are lots of different versions, and I listened to a version by Tia Blake, which people can also go and hear on YouTube. And so normally when I write, I work out a playlist for myself, and often it's a musician's whole body of work, or it might be some certain albums that suit the tone of the novel that I'm writing. And with Unsettled Ground, it took me a long time. I tried all sorts of different bits of music, and none of it kind of worked until I found these 2 tracks. Obviously, I knew Henry's quite well, and as I was writing Unsettled Ground, he was living with us. He's now moved out and moved to Bristol. But he would play his guitar really probably 8 hours a day. And so that sound would be in the house, and that song would be in the house. And sometimes I would be writing in this room where I am now, and he would come in and say, "Oh, I've worked out this new song. Do you want to hear it, Mum?" And I would sit and listen to him. So music, and that particular kind of folk music and guitar, acoustic guitar music, was around me, actually physically around me while I was writing. And so I think because there were just 2 pieces of music, they kind of sunk into what I was writing and became part of what I was writing. So I had no plan to make the characters folk musicians. That just kind of evolved because I needed to give them, I felt like I wanted to give them something more than this very difficult life that they were managing. I needed to give them, and the reader and myself perhaps, a little bit of joy, which I think...
Yes, absolutely. Because if you imagine the book without the music, then they would be really rather depressing characters. But with the music, they become elevated. And actually, Julius is really charming in the way that he plays his music to the girl that he visits, Shelley Swift, and has a liaison with. And she's really charmed by his old-fashioned music playing, which is really sweet. And I really love their little dalliance and romance, which is very unlike most modern romances, seemingly. And Shelley Swift is a really fantastic character who I also love for the fact that she's 51 and she's portrayed as a bit of a sexual siren. And you don't realize for the first few chapters when we meet her what age she is. And I must admit I was picturing someone much younger, which is my fault for imagining that. I just had it in my mind that she might be kind of 35 or something. And then it's great when she reveals that she's actually 51 and she's saying, you know, I don't want to settle down. So I love the fact that you chose a slightly more mature woman to be your siren in the book. Where did she come from as an idea? Because she's I love her name, Shelley Swift.
Yes.
And I love her personality.
I love Shelley Swift too. I don't know, and the odd thing is she gets called Shelley Swift all the way through, doesn't she? She's never Shelley, and I'm not even sure why that is, but she's just always Shelley Swift. Maybe there was once another Shelley in the village. I don't know. I don't know where she came from. I wanted to have a contrast between what Julius wanted and his potential kind of love life, and the fact that Jeannie doesn't have one and doesn't actually seem to want one. In my mind, Jeannie is probably kind of asexual, really. She's just not interested in relationships. She doesn't even miss them. It's not something that is lacking in her life. And I wanted to show her kind of, you know, by the end of the book, she has changed, and perhaps, she gets part of what she wishes for, but not in the way that she expects it. And she learns to accept help from people. But she
Mm.
doesn't need a man to do that, really. I mean, there is a man kind of financially, but in a sexual or relationship way, she doesn't need a man. So I wanted to contrast Julius with that he does want and need a woman. So, Shelley Swift was kind of fulfilling that role. But obviously she does much more than that. And I think she's just such a great character. I even love the clothes she wears and the lipstick, and how forward she is. She is the person who kisses Julius first and kind of laughs at him when he's a little bit shy and coy. I do think often it's the other way around in fiction, isn't it?
That's true. And also she makes us like Julius more because we see Julius through her eyes, and she's always saying how great he is. So that's really interesting. But also Shelley Swift is a great contrast to Jeannie in her reading, because she's always reading paperbacks, and I love her for that. She has big stacks of paperbacks on her coffee table, which we realised that she actually pilfered from the little library box that they have as a telephone box, and that was a great detail that I really loved, that all the telephone boxes in the rural villages have been turned into libraries for the villagers. And that's a lovely idea, which I really applaud. But then it also becomes an issue later on in the book when Jeannie needs to make a phone call and thinks that the phone box is a phone box. So it just shows how out of touch Jeannie is there. But the contrast with Shelley is that Shelley's a massive reader, whereas Jeannie is actually illiterate. And that's another really important, interesting theme within your novel, that there is an illiterate character in the 21st century who's slipped through the net. Did that occur to you early on in the novel, or did that slowly evolve while you were writing her character?
I think that came quite early on because I wanted to kind of give both the twins some challenges. So Julia finds it difficult to go in any kind of transport for any length of time, anything with an engine. He's terribly travel sick, and the reason becomes apparent for that later on. And so Jeannie, I did give her this challenge of not being able to read or write. I think quite early on, or it's hard to say what came first, because part of that is to do with her diagnosis of her heart condition and the fact that she had rheumatic fever as a child, and so she missed a lot of school. But then also I think probably she's severely dyslexic, and that was missed because the letters kind of jump around when she tries to read them. But it was really interesting writing somebody who is semi-literate because, well, I had to do a lot of research around it, and the statistics are quite staggering. It's something like, so the statistics are for England, and I think it's 5% of adults have a reading age of 5 or below in England.
Wow, that's appalling.
It's a huge number. That is a huge number.
And seems unimaginable in the 21st century.
Yeah, but it is a big problem, and it costs the country an awful lot of money because it's very difficult for them to get jobs if you can't read. I don't want to kind of lump them together as one group, but there's all sorts of challenges. And as I was writing Jeannie, I kind of came to understand what these challenges were, I think, because I would put her in situations and then suddenly realise that I know she can't do this because she can't read or write. How is she going to get round this? So, she goes to the shop to buy some food, she has £5.55 or something, and she can't read all the things on all the packets. So, you know, she has to make kind of guesses based on the colours of the packets and all sorts of different things. But she,
Yes, the chicken gravy, she knows
yeah,
it's chicken because it's yellow.
yes, yeah, thing. And then there came a point where I thought, well, I need Jeannie to try and get a job. But obviously she has no technology, and even if she did, she wouldn't be able to read it. She wouldn't be able to write her CV. She wouldn't be able to email anybody. So what do you do if you're in that situation? Because all jobs, nearly all jobs, are online these days, or if not, they're printed somehow or other. So I sent her off to the newsagents thinking, well, she, you know, there's those little cards in the window. And I had actually seen, and she was at the newsagents looking at these cards. And then I really suddenly thought, but she can't read those either. There's no solution.
No.
Can't read those. And so she creates a solution where she gets the information. Oh, obviously I'm writing it, I'm finding that solution, but it really felt like it was the character showing me the way round to get that information and also hide the fact that she can't read it from the person who helps her. And it just really kind of opened my eyes to how she would have to live her life with all these little tips and tricks to hide that from people. It was
Yes, and
really,
she's very clever the way she does get round her reading issues. And initially, she's far too horrified to tell anyone or ask for help, and she does hide it very well. But as the book goes on and she has to cope with more of modern reality, she actually, we see her owning her illiteracy and actually not being proud of it, but telling it like it is,
yeah.
which is really great to witness. And the other thing that I found really frustrating on her behalf was the fact that she doesn't have a bank account. And when she finally gets a part-time job, she's paid by check, and she's too proud to tell her employer that she doesn't have a bank account. And that's so frustrating because there she is with absolutely no money, counting her pennies and cooking carrots and mushroom soup from tins. And she's got all these checks sitting, waiting to be cashed, and she can't use them. It's really frustrating. But you can completely empathize and be in her shoes. And that also reminded me, just thinking of her having no money, of her spending one night sleeping in a public toilet, which that was one of the most affecting scenes. And she's very matter of fact about it. She kind of accepts her fate and is embracing the fact that she's going to have to sleep there, and she gets all prepared to do it and puts her bags in a secret place so that she can come back later. And then she's so uncomfortable that she basically doesn't sleep all night. That was very vivid. Did you have to go and sleep in a public toilet in order to research it?
No, I didn't, but I did, you know, go in public toilets and imagine what would it be like to spend the night here, because you know, lights never go out. They're never kind of very well cleaned, are they? And they're always a little bit smelly.
No.
And you know, when you to be kind of quite frank, when you use the toilet, a cubicle, and you sit on the toilet, if you're a woman, and the door closes, and you realize that the person who cleaned with the door open, because you know you clean facing the toilet, but if you go in and you sit down, and you can see that it's not kind of clean behind the door. So I didn't spend the night, but I did visit it
That's
with
really
yeah.
yeah.
The other thing I did do was take something, I think it was £5.55 that Jeannie has, to my local small co-op supermarket, and think, well, if I, you know, supposing Jeannie has chickens, so I have some eggs, I'm thinking, but I need to, say, fry the eggs. and if I just have this much money, do I buy some oil to fry the eggs in, or some margarine, which margarine, you could use that also for sandwiches, but there's no point in buying margarine unless you can afford the bread. And then if
Yeah.
you have a dog, what are you going to feed your dog, because you cannot afford canned dog food. So I did go shopping imagining that that was all the money I had, and that was really, really difficult, because you can't get, you seriously can't get very much. I know we kind of all know that in theory, but to go and actually just have that in your purse was.
Yes, and to picture yourself just having that for the next week and not knowing where you might get another £5 from.
Yeah.
So the book is full of all sorts of really lovely touches and deeply empathetic moments, like when she miraculously finds a £20 note in one of the coats of her mother's, and that's a really moving moment. But the whole poverty angle of the book is very prevalent. But also one of the interesting things about the book is the way that Jeannie and Julius are both major misfits in society. And I wondered if you have a particular love of misfits in fiction or in real life.
I do actually. In fact, just today, I think it's been published on LitHub. I don't know if you get LitHub, the kind of literary newsletter that comes out of America. And I wrote, I think it was my 5 favorite books with oddballs, it's called, something like that. So, it is a list of books with
Oh,
oddballs.
brilliant.
And yeah, I do. I find them really fascinating in fiction. Somebody who's just, well, first of all, they are a little bit quirky, but I think often the difference is that it is public and other people can see it. Whereas I kind of think we're probably all a little bit eccentric. We all have odd ways. It's just sometimes people learn how to hide them in public. But at home, we probably, unless it's just me, we all have certain ways of doing things, that someone else would come along and see and go, wow, that's really weird. Everyone else always seems weird to us. But anyway, I do really enjoy that in fiction. I do.
I wondered if there's one book which for me is the epitome of a misfit in society, which is The Woman in the Dunes by Kobo Abe,
I don't know.
which is a Japanese book. It's an amazing book, which I think if you haven't read, you would probably love, because it's a very strange book, but it's all set in a desert, and it's about a man who kind of gets sucked into this village where the sand is constantly pouring into their houses, and they have to be constantly shoveling it out in order not to be overwhelmed by the sand. And they effectively lure in visitors to do the digging for them, and they become trapped. and the guy that gets trapped is an absolute misfit himself, and it's a really strange and powerful book, and it also has an amazing sense of place, like your books all do. I think it's one of the things that I always feel is most important and tangible about your novels is their very tangible sense of actually being in the place that you're describing. So that caravan, for instance, I can absolutely picture it with the piano as well, and also the cottage where they grew up, Jeannie and Julius, and all the scenes, the public toilets. I mean, I feel like I live in that village which you described. So I think you do have an amazing genius of portraying place in your novels. Talking of genius and being shortlisted for the Women's Prize, I wondered, what do you think about the other people on that list? And have you read all of them yet?
I haven't read them all. I've read a couple, and I really enjoyed them. So yeah, I can't really kind of comment on all the rest of them because yeah, I haven't read them all. I do intend to, you know, I want to know what the competition is. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I kind of think if it would be lovely, of course it would be lovely if Unsettled Ground wins, but I don't necessarily think it will. There is kind of one novel on the list I think is more likely to win. Um, but the announcement, which is on the 7th of July, of who the winner is meant to be, fingers crossed, at an actual live in-person party in London. And really, I just want to go to a party. You know, I could win.
Absolutely. I so hope you can. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And do you have any hot favorites of the ones that you have read so far?
I'm not sure it would be fair to say because I haven't read them all, and I need to kind of yeah, I'd want to read them all really before I made a judgment.
Yes, okay. Very diplomatic. Um, so so I did say that we would after talking for a while, see if anyone else who's joined has any questions. So if anyone that's there at the moment wants to type us a question, please do. But meanwhile, I I've got a couple of questions that came in earlier on Twitter and on my Facebook page. So one of the ones that someone was asking was, is there any one book that made you want to be a writer? Any one book that you read as a child or teenager or young adult that made you want to write yourself?
Well, no, because yeah, not really, because certainly not at that age, because I didn't plan to be a writer. It wasn't something that I dreamed of at all. And I didn't start writing till I was 40, creative writing. And then my first book was published when I was 48. So I did come to it very late and without any intention of being a writer, and now here I am, and I'm very happy to be a writer, but it wasn't like that for me. But there is a novel that I read around the time that I was 40, so it didn't make me want to be a writer, but it did make me think I would love to be able to write like this, which is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which
That
also
is an amazing book.
sense of space, sense of place, and is very atmospheric and kind of creepy, and there's something sinister that underlies it all. You know, it's a fantastic novel.
Excellent. And you were actually an artist before you became a writer, weren't you?
Yes.
So they're not so far away from each other as professions, but obviously very different craft. So we do have a question here. Which books, if any, influenced Unsettled Ground? That's from Jill Sky. Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question, because when I am writing a novel, I do carry, some writers stop reading fiction because they're worried that they're going to be influenced. But whereas I search out fiction that seems to cover similar themes, not to copy it, but just obviously to see what other people have written, and to get a kind of sense of the thing that I'm writing about. But with Unsettled Ground, I really couldn't find anything. I couldn't find any fiction set in England that covered rural poverty. Since I've written it, though, there is a book called King of Rabbits by, oh, I've forgotten the woman's name. Anyway, that is about kind of rural poverty. But that,
Yes, that's one I've seen. It's only quite recently
yeah,
published, isn't it? Yeah.
it
And
wasn't
that sounds great.
when I was writing. It's a great book. It's really, really good. Wish I could remember her name. It'll come to me in a minute. And then there was also Elmet. I don't know if you remember that, by Fiona Mosley.
Yes.
was set in kind of a rural situation, but still didn't cover the same kind of subject. So there wasn't. I couldn't find anything. The closest thing I think to be that might have influenced me was on the Black Hill by Bruce Chatwin. Do you know that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Just
that's a fantastic book. Yeah.
adult men, I think they're in their 50s, maybe even older, who are farmers and live together, brothers, and their parents have died, and they live in a village. But I think that's set some time ago. You know, it's not contemporary, so I couldn't find
Mm.
anything. It was very
King
interesting.
of Rabbits is by Carla Neblett, by the way.
Thank
Yeah. And Elmet is an amazing book, but and it is about rural poverty, but it's very different
you.
to your book and the other ones you've been talking about, because it has quite a lot of rage in it as well. Thomas Hardy, would you say he might fit into the rural poverty
Yes, and I do
framework?
love Thomas Hardy. I don't read a lot of classic literature, but Thomas Hardy is one that I do or have done in the past. And yeah, but I'm not sure I read it at the time that I was writing Unsettled Ground.
No.
Those are kinds of novels that I've read some time ago. But I did go and visit at the time that I was writing Unsettled Ground. I went to Hardy's cottage is it in Dorset or Devon? Can't remember.
Dorset, I think.
I
Not
think
sure.
it's Dorset. Which is an amazing place run by the National Trust and very, it's all kind of got furnishings in from the time that he would have been there. So, yeah, his fiction didn't particularly influence me, but his house did.
Yeah, very interesting. That was a great question. Thanks for that. So I've also got a question for you in my role as a bibliotherapist. Do you have any ailments that you'd care to share that I might be able to treat with a good novel?
Something that I think should be talked about more and is beginning to be. There was a documentary which I still have to watch. I think it was on Channel 4, which is the menopause, which is what I'm going through at the moment and suffering from some of the symptoms, you know, night sweats and hot flushes and all those horrible things that stop me sleeping. And I had acupuncture to see if I could kind of sort some of those out. Didn't particularly help. So any bibliotherapy that might help with that would be very welcome.
Excellent. Well, it's a really interesting question because it is, I agree, something that should be talked about more. And it's not that easy to find many novels that talk about the menopause in any great detail. And when Susan Elderkin and I wrote the novel Cure a few years ago, we found it quite hard to find cures for the menopause, but we do have a couple. And one of them is The Summer Before the Dark by Doris Lessing, which is a really great book where the heroine is going through the beginning of the menopause. She's only 45 and she's just having a bit of a general life crisis, kids leaving home. And she effectively tries on lots of different roles of getting a new job, trying out a new name, trying out different things. And she ends up having a nervous breakdown, but it does then turn into something positive, and she bursts out from her chrysalis into something new. So that's one which is really good. Then also The Private Lives of Pippa Lee by Rebecca Miller. Have you ever read that? That she's an American novelist, and it's a lighter kind of read, but it is a very kind of full on, in a way, description of what the menopause is like. And the heroine is 50, her husband is nearly 80, and he wants to move into a retirement home, and she's horrified. And so she completely flips out when they do move into the retirement home, and she has a complete change of life, and it's kind of quite shocking. It's not kind of all fun and sex. It's quite intense, and she has a sort of implosion in a way, but then it also does move on to better things, and it's quite a fun kind of romp through all the worst aspects of the menopause in a way. So I really enjoyed that, and I'm also going through the menopause, so I sympathize fully. Then I also recently um, came across this book, Scent, by Isabel Costello, which is only just published, and it's exactly what we're talking about as well. It's
I have
about a woman.
shelves, but I still haven't read it, so I
Oh,
must.
fantastic. Yeah, well, it's really deeply enjoyable, set in Paris, and it's all about a woman who is having a bit of a life crisis with her husband. They've been married for 30 years. She had a gay relationship when she was much younger, and she's sort of at a crisis point in her career as well. And all sorts of things come together at that moment. And I just thought it was a great analysis of going through that stage of life and seeming to be in a really good position, seeming to have it all, but then actually realizing that everything, that she's on unsettled ground, basically. So I think that's a really fun one that you might really enjoy and find helpful in terms of the menopause. So I think maybe we should be coming to an end, because I did say I'd only be half an hour and I've actually run on quite a lot. But I just wanted to mention about the fact that your books are on sale, and you might sign books for any listeners here tonight in your local bookshop. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah, P&G Wells. So I should have looked up their name on Instagram. So yeah, I can't, not sure I can remember. It might be Bookwells. It's certainly Bookwells on Twitter. But if people get in touch with P&G Wells, the independent bookshop, if they want a copy of Unsettled Ground, and buy it through them and arrange delivery through them, and let them know if they just want it signed, or if you want it dedicated to someone, then I can, because it's just down the road from me, I'll hop in and sign the book, and then they can send it off. So very
That's
happy.
fantastic. Great. And I can also put their name underneath the video after this. So I'll find out their name on Instagram. And I'm going to be inspired by you, because there is a grave in the book. I'm going to do next week for my Instagram and Facebook Live bibliotherapy sessions, graves in literature. So I thought that would be quite a fun topic, because there's quite a lot of great stories based around graves, great novels. And if anyone has any favourites, please send them in and I'll try and talk about them. And I'm sure there were other things that I was meant to mention at the end of the session. Oh, I know. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we hope to have a session together at the House of St. Barnabas, because the House of St. Barnabas are opening up again, and we've done a session before when we talked about, I think it was bitter orange, wasn't it?
I think it
It
was.
wasn't, yeah. So we're going to arrange for that sometime in the next few months. So I'm looking forward to that. And Claire also has another session tonight at 1 o'clock in the morning, our time, with a bookshop in America, because your book's just been published there, hasn't it?
Yes.
Remind me the name of that bookshop.
It's Powell's in Portland, Oregon. And yeah, people can go and find them and register. It's a free event. I might be a little bleary-eyed by kind of 1 o'clock this morning.
I think you've got to have a coffee in the middle
Yeah, I think so.
after this.
Yeah, 11 American events coming up, and most of them are all kind of late. So I've kind of shifted my day so that I'm up much later and having a bit of a lie-in in the mornings.
Excellent. Well, Claire, thanks so much for joining me tonight. It's been really lovely to talk to you.
It's good.
And I look forward to being in touch again soon and hopefully doing our House of St. Barnabas event. And good luck with all your American events over the next few weeks.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. And thanks for joining us, everyone that came. Bye. Good evening and welcome to my very exciting live bibliotherapy session tonight when I'm going to be interviewing Claire Fuller about her new novel, Unsettled Ground, which is up for the Women's Prize for Fiction. It's been shortlisted. So it's one of 6 books shortlisted for this year's Women's Prize. Claire Fuller is a fabulous novelist and also an artist, which makes her very close to my heart. And she has written 3 other novels, Our Endless Numbered Days, which won the Desmond Elliott Prize, Swimming Lessons, which I don't have as a physical copy because I listened to it as an audiobook, and Bitter Orange, all of which I deeply love. And now we have her new book, Unsettled Ground, which we're going to be talking about this evening. So I'm just going to bring Claire into the session and then we can start asking her questions. Let's hope that it's the first time that I've done a live session with another person and we have been practicing. Yay! Here you are. Welcome, Claire.
Oh,
It's lovely to have you with me here this evening.
lovely to be here. I'm just trying to adjust so that you can actually see me.
Yes, I actually do really feel like you're here in the same room as me. Good evening and